gear acquisition syndrome. It's this need of buying new gear, investing in new lenses, new cameras, and anything else that comes out, and thinking that that new gear will help you be a better photographer, better videographer. And I have been dealing with that for probably years, ever since I picked up my first camera and started dreaming about the next camera I will buy. My goal for the rest of this year is not to spend any more money on gear, or at least not to spend money on gear that I don't actually need. So I think that going through all of the gear that I have will give me more perspective on how much stuff I actually do have, how much stuff I don't use enough, and how little I need. Before jumping into the draws, I just want to mention the camera that I'm filming this on, which is the Fujifilm X-H2S, and it's been my workhorse camera for about a year, I think, and it's been amazing at both photography and videography. And talking about Fujifilm, I only had Fujifilm cameras. The second camera that I have is my Fujifilm X-T3. I have had this thing for years and it's been amazing, but over time the internal battery has started dying, so from time to time the camera just resets itself randomly, sometimes while changing batteries, sometimes just while sitting there. If I'm using it, let's say on a wedding, on a locked off tripod shot, I will plug it into a power bank just to make sure it doesn't die and that it can continue shooting throughout the wedding without resetting. So let's go through this drawer from left to right. So on the left we have my drone. I own the DJI Mavic Air 1. This drone is old as hell, but it's held up quite well. I've crashed it a bunch of times and it's still alive. It's definitely showing battle scars and scratches all around, but it still works. Haven't really had the need to upgrade, and as long as this thing works, I think I'll keep using it. I have 3 batteries for it, which is more than enough for how much I fly it. Here on the bottom we have a bunch of filters, CPL filters, polarizers, mist filters, and the main filters I use most of the time are these KNF Concept Fader ND filters. I also have a bunch of step up, step down rings, so I can use the filters on different lenses. And speaking of lenses, as I said, I have the Tamron 17-70 f2.8 on the camera right now, and that's my main lens. It's one of just 2 autofocus lenses that I own, and it's the one that I trust more. Having the 17-70 range at f2.8 is amazing. I have a full video about this lens. Now let's go to the other stuff. This is probably the second lens I use the most, which is a 7 Artisans 35mm f1.2. It's a completely manual lens, it's cheap as hell, and it's just great. My X-T3 and this lens is just a nice compact setup. Manual focusing is fun for me. I usually shoot everything at f8 or something around that, so it's easy to focus and it's easy to use. The second lens is a Viltrox 56mm f1.4. It's not the best lens, the autofocus it's not the best, but it works. Has a bit of chromatic aberration. It's not the sharpest out there, but it's a nice lens to have if you want more separation and don't want to spend a lot of money. I've bought this thing, again, really cheap. I don't remember anymore, but it was about 100 euros or something like that, because it was dented and the aperture was turning quite heavily. Now it turns fine because I took the lens apart and I straightened the part that was dented. But yeah, the only reason I bought it was because it popped up on the used market and it was cheap as hell, and just why not? Here we have my 12mm f2. This is a completely manual lens. Again, not the best, not the worst. It's sharp enough, it's decent. It has a bit of problems with flaring. It doesn't have much contrast. The image is a bit washed out, but you can fix that in editing, so that's not an issue. It's cheap and it works. Yeah, I've also wanted to upgrade this thing for a while now. I would love to get the Viltrox 13mm, and I think I definitely will at some point, but hopefully I can resist until the end of the year. This is my Camlan 50mm f1.1, and this lens is again manual lens, cheap as hell. I think I paid like 40 euros for it on the used market again. But this thing is just amazing. It's soft, it has chromatic aberration, but it just gives such a nice bokeh. If you like that swirly effect that a lot of the vintage lenses give you, this lens gives you the same thing for the price of a tank of gas or something. It's definitely worth it if you don't mind having to use manual focus. Also, focusing at f1.1, it's amazingly difficult, but if you're filming and if you have a monitor on your camera, it really helps. Here on top I have a bunch of random stuff. I have two power banks which come in handy. I use this one whenever I'm setting up my Fujifilm X-H2S into a camera rig, which I have a whole video about and will be linked down below. And the other one I use whenever I set up my Fujifilm X-T3 on a tripod during, as I said before, weddings and stuff like that, where I just need it to be locked off and shooting without turning off. Because God knows Fujifilm X-T3 batteries suck, especially when shooting in 4K. The next thing is my GoPro, well, my sister's GoPro Max, which is a 360 camera. It has two lenses on both sides. New 360 cameras are definitely better, but this thing does the job. Here I have a card holder. This was a gift from my friend Patrick, and it's just a nice compact card holder and also card reader. Here you have a USB-C and you can plug in a card in here and just run it to your computer or something. Below here I have my batteries. So for the Fujifilm X-H2S I use small rig, so third-party batteries, but they work fine. I haven't had any issues with them. They last a tiny bit less than the Fujifilm one, but other than that, it's a battery, there's no issues. And for the X-T3 I have one original battery and some random Grey Sky third-party batteries, which again, no issues. They may last a little bit less than the original Fujifilm camera, but they work fine. And regarding the issues that I have with the X-T3, I've had them as many times with the original battery as I did with the third party, so I don't think the batteries actually affect the issue that I have. And the last lens I have here is a vintage Fujifilm 200mm f4.5 lens. Yeah, I've used this thing a handful of times. I have a video on my channel as well. I got it in a bundle deal with another vintage lens which I don't have anymore. And yeah, I just have an X-mount adapter on here to be able to use it on my Fujifilm bodies, but I don't really use it that much. Then all around here you'll find a bunch of lens hoods for all the lenses, and in this box I have my flash, which is a cheap make a speedlight flash. It just takes two AA batteries, and for it I have these Godox small triggers, and they usually work quite well as long as the distance between them is not too big. Here I have the battery for my monitor, which is a Viltrox. The battery is an NPF 550, and I hate that it's white, but I love that it has a USB-C port on top, which just makes charging it that much easier. I really need to get a bigger one or another one of these for my monitor, because just this one lasts too short, and usually I need to rely on external power for the monitor, which again I do from the power bank whenever I set up the X-H2S into a camera rig. In here I have my favorite action camera of all time, which is the Insta360 Go 3. And this has been my go-to action camera for anything for the past 6 months. I got it as a gift from my fiance for my birthday, and it's definitely the best birthday gift I ever gotten. This thing is just amazing, being able to take it out and just have something that has this small of a footprint, and also it being magnetic and having the magnetic pendant to put it on your shirt or something, and not having to wear a big chest strap to shoot POVs and stuff like that is just amazing. It doesn't have the best video quality, but it's an action camera, and I care more about how convenient this thing is than how good the video quality is. I think it's acceptable, and I'm really happy to have this thing. In the second drawer I have stuff that I use a bit less. So coming up here on the top left corner I have my cages. This is my Fujifilm X-T3 cage. The second cage is my Fujifilm X-H2S cage, and this has a side handle as well for when I build up the rig. Here's my top handle. It's just a small rig top handle. I like that it's reversible, so you can use it both ways. It helps you balance the camera better and has a bunch of different mounting options, which is nice. Here I have two more top handles. These are also small rig, but they're quite old and definitely not the best there is. I don't like that they're fixed and they don't really balance well on the camera. I haven't used these in probably a year or maybe even more. This is my Rode Video Micro. I'm happy with it. I like that it doesn't have a battery, it doesn't have to charge, you just plug it into your camera and it just works. And this is just a dead cat attachment that comes with the mic. And in here I also have another mic, which is from this company called Boya, and it's just a Rode Video Micro copy. I bought this one just because for my Rode Video Micro I had lost this small little shock mount, and unfortunately I wasn't able to buy just the shock mount because I would have had to wait like 3 weeks for it to get here, and the second cheapest option was just to buy this knockoff Rode Video Micro and get the shock mount from there. This is another mic, and this thing is really funny. It's just a kitchen sponge with a lav mic plugged into it. I use this to record car exhaust sounds. The kitchen sponge just helps get less wind noise and stuff like that, which is really nice. Here are a bunch of hard drives that I own. This is just cold storage for when I finish a project. And in here I have this L bracket, which I also use whenever I'm building up my X-H2S rig, as well as these lenses for the Insta360 Go 3. These right here are my mics, my lav mics. You can see I'm using one right here. The receiver is on the camera, and this is the third one. They're Moman C1 mics. I have honestly never heard of the company, but the mics work great. I think you can see that most of my gear is on the cheaper side. I'm trying to save money on stuff where I can, but keep the quality as good as it can be for the price. And this last pouch right here is my Viltrox DC550 monitor, which is probably the best monitor you can buy for under 200 euros or $200 if you're in the US. Comes in with this nice strong hood, and I don't know, I'm just happy with how this monitor performs. And you can see more about this monitor and all the other rigging stuff in my camera rig video. And basically that's it. Around here I have a bunch of boxes for filters if I have to transport them, maybe some more cables, camera straps, and this is a diffusion box for one of the lights that I showed you earlier. And that's most of the gear that I own. I also have this gimbal, which is my Feutech AK2000S. And it's, I don't know, it's a gimbal, it does the job. I don't like using it as any other gimbal, so most of the time it just stays here. And I use it selectively for stuff that I really want to be smooth and nice and controlled. But for most of my stuff I really like the handheld look, and I can get decently smooth footage with my handheld skills and the IBIS in the X-H2S and the OIS in the Tamron 17-70 f2.8. Also I have an iPhone and this magic arm and clamp just when I have to rig some stuff in some random places. I also own two tripods. One is really old, one is really cheap, but the only way I ever use tripods is for just locked off shots, which you can see the cheap tripod is doing that job quite well right now, and the other one does a good job as well. And I also own a bunch of cards to be able to shoot. These are my X-H2S cards, CF Express Type B and an V60 SD, both 512 gigs. And these are cards that I use in the X-T3 two Lexar 256 gigs ones and one Sony 128 gigs. All the cards are V60 speed, and that's good enough for what I need. So that's all of the gear that I own right now as of May 2024. I think this is going to change next year, but for now, that's all I own and that's all I really want to own. There's a bunch of other lenses that I want to buy. I really want more autofocus lenses and faster glass. I'm really interested in the Viltrox 27mm f1.2. I would love a Sigma 18-35, but yeah, I don't really want to spend the money right now because I know that the gear I have can produce great stuff and I can make everything that I want to make with what I own right now.